are you?
Good.
Good. I want to start today's lesson by reading you an article. The article is called The Roaring Twenties History. The Roaring Twenties were a period in history of dramatic social and political change. For the first time, more Americans lived in cities than on farms. The nation's total wealth more than doubled between 1920 and 1929, and the economic growth swept many Americans into an affluent but unfamiliar consumer society. So once again, the article was titled The Roaring Twenties History. Did you enjoy it?
I did.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a few questions about the article we just finished. Do you think this article was based on true events or were they made up?
True.
True events. What makes you say that?
Because they're historical events.
Historical events, okay. Have you ever heard of the Roaring Twenties before this article?
Mm-hmm.
Where had you heard it before?
In school.
In school. Do you know what time period the Roaring Twenties were identified with?
The 1920s.
Enjoyed today's reading. The reason I chose to open our lesson with the reading of the article, The Roaring Twenties, is because today we are going to be learning about a new reading genre. A genre is a classification of a book based on its characteristics. Our focus today is going to be on the genre of nonfiction. After we review and discuss nonfiction, we are going to be completing an activity based on our learning style. Okay, does that make sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's move on. All right, so nonfiction is the genre that we're going to discuss today. Nonfiction is a description of a book that is based on fact, real events, or real people. Okay, so nonfiction is based on fact, real events, or real people. Okay, common forms of nonfiction include letters, journals, biographies, autobiographies, newspapers, magazines, essays, articles, and editorials. Okay, I know that's a lot to remember. So, but you know the common ones. You know what an article is, right? Do you know the difference between a biography and an autobiography?
One's on tape and one's not.
No, actually, a biography is a story of a person's life that is written by somebody else, whereas an autobiography is a story of a person's life written by that person. You've seen newspapers, and surely you've seen letters, right? Was there anything that I listed off that you hadn't heard of before that we should discuss? No? Okay. So identifiable elements of nonfiction include that the information is usually presented in a chronological order. Do you know what chronological means? No? Okay. So chronological means that the information is presented in a logical form. So that means that it could go from the beginning when it happened in order to when it ended, or sometimes chronological can mean that the story starts at the ending and it'll work its way to the beginning, but it's not going to skip around. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. Another identifiable element of nonfiction is that the text is usually showing cause and effect relationships. Sometimes it can show comparing and contrasting relationships. The text can also show problem and solution relationships, and sometimes, or most often, the text is going to be about a real person or a real event, okay? Are you following me so far? Okay. Now that we finished learning about nonfiction, that we were going to complete an activity that suited our learning style, okay? Have you ever heard of the 8 multiple intelligences? Yeah, do you want to explain to me what you know?
I'll let you.
Okay, so it's also known as the 8 different learning styles. Basically, learning style is the preferred method of learning based on a person's specific needs. In other words, everyone learns differently, and not everyone will perform in the same way during classroom activities. Okay, does that make sense? So you and I, we don't learn the same, right? No, or we might, who knows? So we're going to go through the 8 different learning styles really quickly. The first one we're going to discuss is interpersonal. So interpersonal learners benefit from interaction with other students. These learners learn best when working with peers or in groups. Interpersonal learners prefer a learning environment without interaction. So these learners benefit from setting their own tasks, choosing their own topics, and setting their own goals. So essentially these learners work best by themselves. Another type of learner is the verbal linguistic. These learners prefer learning through the written or spoken word. These learners benefit from classroom debates, share aloud ideas in the classroom. So these learners learn best when speaking or hearing words. So that's how they process information. Next learner is the bodily kinesthetic learner. These learners enjoy movement and exercise as they learn. These learners learn best through hands-on activities or activities that include movement. After that, we have the logical mathematical learners. These learners benefit from reasoning and clear and simple explanations. These learners enjoy objective lessons that are presented with problems that they get to solve. So a lot of times the logical or mathematical learners, they will really excel in mathematical classes. They like things really short and concise and to the point. Are you following me so far? I know we just went through a lot. Were there any ones that you needed help with thus far? Okay, we just have a few more left to review. The next one is auditory musical learners. These learners benefit when information is presented through sounds, rhymes, rhythms, jingle, and music. So a lot of times these learners really like to learn information through like songs or by making up their own chants, okay? The next one is the naturalistic learner. So sometimes the naturalistic learner isn't identified within the multiple intelligences, but today we're going to go through it anyways. So this learner prefers a learning environment that is connected to nature and the world. They learn best when nature is incorporated into their learning experiences. Okay, does that one make sense? I know it kind of seems out there, but essentially, by relating what we're learning about to nature, that's how this learner learns best. Okay, so we just finished reviewing the 8 different multiple intelligences, also known as learning styles. Did you have any questions about any specific one? Okay. We also have just wrapped up learning about the nonfiction genre. Just to recap, the nonfiction genre includes information about real people, real events, and facts. So today we're going to be researching and identifying a nonfiction article, journal, or editorial from the World Wide Web. Remember me mentioning that articles, journals, and editorials are types of writing that are classified under nonfiction. After reading your text selection, I want you to consider how you know and are able to identify that the text is nonfiction using the elements we discussed in today's lesson. However, I am going to give you a list of activities that relate to this project, and you get to decide which one you would like to do. I want you to keep in mind the 8 different learning styles that we talked about today and choose the one that you believe will most benefit you. Okay? Are you following me so far? So I am going to walk you through all 8 activities that I have prepared for you today. Once again, you'll choose one of these activities to do after you select the article, journal, or editorial based on nonfiction. Okay? You following me? Perfect. Okay, so after all 8 activities, before we move on, did you have any specific questions? So in the article, it talked about the new woman. Do you remember talking about that? So the new woman was the flapper girl. So I am going to draw a picture of the new woman. So if you remember, the Prohibition was period during the 1920s when the government banned alcohol. So I'm going to draw a picture of alcohol and put an X through it. Okay, so you see where I'm gathering ideas from my article and I'm just putting them into pictures. Okay, so if you remember, it said in that activity that after I drew pictures to represent the article, I had to go in and I had to write 2 to 3 sentences that discuss what my picture was representing, and then also a few points that made the article identifiable as nonfiction. So I'm going to go ahead and write this picture is of symbols from the Roaring '20s. Okay, so this sentence sums up what my picture is representing, right? Then I'm going to say that one identifiable element from my article that made it nonfiction was that it was based on a historical time period, right? So this article is nonfiction because it was based on a historical time period. Okay? So I have one sentence that discusses what my picture is representing. I have another sentence that discusses how I know my article is nonfiction. Okay? You see where I'm going with this activity? Okay. So now I want you to choose one out of the 8 activities to do today. So I'll give you the list. Where's my... Thank you. So go ahead and look over the activities and then let me know whenever you've chosen one.
Activity 5.
Okay, so you want to do activity 5. The learner works by him or herself to find a nonfiction article. The student will make a list of all elements and characteristics that made the article nonfiction. So that was the one where you're going to read your article and you're going to pick out at least 5 bullet points that discusses how you know the article is nonfiction, correct? Okay. I want you to go ahead and get your computer and begin to research articles that you would like to do your activity on. I'm going to closely monitor you as you work, so if you have any questions about identifying an article that you can use, say like you don't know if the article is nonfiction or not, you can just ask me, okay? Okay, you can go ahead and begin searching for an article. Are you running into any problems?
No.
No? Do you have any questions? Okay. One thing that I want to point out to you as you're looking for an article is to make sure you're using credible websites. You're finding your articles, journals, or editorials on websites that aren't going to give us fake information, because that would go totally against the nonfiction genre. So look for websites that are using .org, .edu, stuff like that, okay? Is that making sense? Okay. So it looks like you have found an article, okay? What makes you think that your article is nonfiction?
Because it's a historical moment.
What historical moment is it representing?
The Titanic.
The Titanic, specifically
Sinking.
Okay. Are there any other elements that stand out to you that make it nonfiction?
It gives a specific date.
Gives a specific date, okay? One thing that I noticed as I was reading your article, as you were scrolling, as that it goes in chronological order. You remember me mentioning that nonfiction writing usually is presented in a chronological order, right? So that's one element that stood out to me. as making it nonfiction, okay? Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, now you are ready to begin your activity. You chose the bullet pointing, okay? So go ahead, read through your article again, and then I want you to write down at least 5 bullet points about elements that make your text nonfiction. Feel free to do more though, okay? We may begin. If you have any questions, just raise your hand and I'll help you. So now that you've finished your activity, I want you to pick 2 out of the 5 bullet points you have here and elaborate on them as to why they support the fact that you think that your article is nonfiction, okay?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Specific time and place. It was nonfiction because the article stated a specific time and place. The specific time would be April 15th that the ship had sank. And the place should be the Atlantic Ocean, which is a real ocean where it sank.
Okay, what else?
Another reason it would be nonfiction is because it gave a cause and effect. The cause is the ship hit an iceberg, and the effect would be that the ship sank and killed several.
Very good job with your activity. You did a great job of using your bullet points to explain to me why you think your article is nonfiction. I would agree that your article would fall into the nonfiction genre. My favorite point that you brought up was that your article was based on cause and effect, and that hinted to you as to your article falling into nonfiction. Now that you've finished your activity, I'm going to have you fill out this multiple intelligences survey. This survey is going to let me, myself, and you know what kind of a learner you are, so then in the future we know what kind of activities to involve you in. So then you learn in the best way possible, okay? So read the questions, and then you are going to fill in the face, or I would rather you circle the face that you feel is most accurate. So the smiley face is going to say, I really agree with this, and then the sad face crying all the way to the left is going to say, I don't agree with this. Okay, does that make sense? All right, you may begin. Okay, now that you've wrapped up filling up the multiple intelligences survey, I'm going to look over this tonight and I'll get the results to you tomorrow. We are going to now do a few review questions from today's lesson, okay? The first question is, what genre did we focus on today?
Nonfiction.
Nonfiction. And can you explain to me what nonfiction text is? Do you need a little help from a friend?
Mm-hmm.
Can you remember
It's
any
facts.
facts? Okay, so I'll elaborate on that. So nonfiction is a genre of text that is based on facts, real places, real events, and real people, okay? Does that make sense? You follow me? Okay. How many different learning styles did we discuss today?
8 of them.
8, and I want you to list off as many as you can remember, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
You had intrapersonal, interpersonal, visual, logical, bodily, verbal.
Verbal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. We also had naturalistic. Did we say auditory?
Nope, that's the one. That's what I was trying to think of, yeah.
Okay, appreciate your diligence during today's activity. We now know what the nonfiction genre is and how we are able to identify it in different texts. Tomorrow we will be discovering the fiction genre, and we will be learning how we are able to identify the fiction genre within different texts, okay? Are there any questions before we wrap up today's lesson? Okay, very good. I'm very proud of you. Thank you.